We're starting off at the Emeka Egbuka, Ohio State wide receiver.
Double E.
6'7" and 6'0" and 7/8 inches.
6'7". Cow.
202 pounds, 9 5/8 inch hands. He's 22 years old. He'll be 23 in October. At his pro day, right? He didn't run at the combine. At the pro day, he ran a 4.45 with a 1.5 10-yard split. He had a 4.12 20-yard shuttle and a 38-inch vertical. Last year at Ohio State in 16 games, he had 81 receptions, 1,011 yards, and 10 touchdowns, 8 rushing attempts, 33 yards. He did all that and 106 targets with only 5 drops, 6% drop rate.
Yeah, give those hand size. That's wise.
Huh?
9 5/8 hands.
I did.
Yeah,
9
that's why
5/8.
he's dropping.
Yep.
He's got good hands.
He does.
Yeah, Emeka ended up being my number 2 overall receiver ahead of Tet. And before anybody says, oh, it's because he went to Ohio State, that's not it. And the reason he got there is because I feel like Emeka is the safest wide receiver of any receiver we're going to talk about. We're like Travis, like he's got the highest upside by a ton. He's in a tier by himself, but like, how is he going to be used? We don't know 100% yet. So that's somewhat unsafe. Tet McMillan, will he be pressed at the line? How is he going to be there? There's a lot of upside, but like Emeka, where he's not like great at everything, he's above average across the board. Like everything he does, man, this guy is smoother than like a politician apologizing. Like he is just great at everything you want him to see him do. Again, okay, great is the wrong word to say he's not great at anything. He's above average at everything.
Yep. He's good. Yeah, he's good at everything, and he's really good at a few things.
Yeah,
right?
His routes are really nice. He's very fluid. He can get the coverage off balance. He's good using his hands. He'll get his hands up late at times as well, which is really nice. His routes are absolutely fantastic. He tracks the ball really well. He'll carve up defenders, keep on their his tempo. Will keep him off balance there. His footwork is really nice. Everything he does is like pro ready. Like
super efficient in all of his movements, right?
Even his catches on the sideline, he was getting both feet in. Like he would double tap his feet down, showing that like he's pro ready. So with the ball in his hands, same thing. Not overly elusive, but has a really good stiff arm, has really good size. You know, he's 6'1", over 200 pounds. Like I don't know why I always thought, but like I never thought like Emeka was a bigger receiver.
He's got very good size.
He's got good size. It's just
fantastic
that
size.
He's got a monster standing next to him, so it makes him look normal. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it was Marvin Harrison for a while, and now it's Jeremiah Smith. Yep. And yeah,
these guys are like 6'4".
I mean, he's not overly explosive. You know, he's not. He doesn't have the loosest hips.
I think that's the thing with him. He's not super explosive out of breaks, but he's savvy as hell and is always open.
He's very smart.
So he knows how to get open. He knows how to work his routes, even though he might not be the most explosive guy laterally or kind of in and out of breaks.
Yeah. The biggest thing for me, he reminded me a lot of his Ohio State teammate, Jackson Smith-Njigba, another player where you didn't necessarily have that one thing that you're like, oh my gosh, that is special, but just doesn't do anything wrong. You know, he's coming from a situation where these guys are coached up. Mm-hmm. They tend to translate really well to the NFL. And I think it's his body control for me is he's just always, he's able to contort his body when he needs to. He's able to make the necessary movements to go up and get the football. You mentioned getting his feet in. Yep. Like he's just always under control. And I think that's a really important trait for a wide receiver to have. We've talked about it before. That kind of combined with a few other things that we kind of all put together as like the ball skills aspect of it. But like, that's one of the biggest aspects in all of it is just how in control are you? Are you able to make the necessary movements at the drop of a dime to make a play happen? And he can do that at any point. And
he's smart too. Like he'll move a defensive back, like with he'll have sudden, he'll move his head suddenly, his shoulders. He does these little things to give himself just enough extra space to put himself in position, show his numbers to the quarterback.
That's the savviness that I'm talking about there. Yeah.
Later hands.
I call it, you call it savvy. I call it football smart.
Right.
Yeah, the same thing.
It's all the same thing.
He does those little things to really put himself in a good position for success, which again, why I have him as number 2 is I think safe is like, he's the guy that week in, week out, I could see 8 catches, 75 yards. Week in, week out.
No doubt in my mind that he's that type of guy in the NFL. The one thing I guess we should probably discuss is where's he going to play? He's a guy that went from like about 50% in 2021 playing in the slot and playing out wide to 81%, and it kind of just climbed steadily up into 2024 to that 81% in the slot. Where do you guys see him in the NFL? Because I think he's got the movement skills to kind of do anything.
I think that's the one special thing about Emeka Egbuka is almost every receiver in this class is limited to a specific role. A couple of them, you could say they might be able to do 2 roles.
Yeah.
He's the unicorn in this sense where like you could use, like a team could view him. One team could view him as an X. One team could view him as a Z. One team could view him as a slot receiver, a Z guy. Like he could be used in a lot of different areas and still be successful. His release is good enough that he can handle press coverage, so you're not worried about him on the outside. He's got the size needed to be an X. Like he just, what does your team need? Okay, I'll fill that role and be that guy. And you saw that at Ohio State. He was a very willing teammate to just do whatever. His numbers actually dipped this year. And you would think losing a Marvin Harrison Jr., his numbers should have gone up, right? And like that should be a red flag. No, he had a generational talent in Jeremiah Smith. And he said, okay, let's let him be the focal point of the offense. I'll run off defenders at times. I'll do the blocking downfield. I'll do those things. So that's the thing for him that is such a nice plus is some of these other guys you'll talk about the attitudes or the, whatever. Like this is a guy without that arrogance. He's a guy without that I want it. It's all about me. Like he's going to be a breath of fresh air in whatever locker room he goes into, and he's going to be an asset in whatever that coach asks him to do.
Yeah, I think I'm with you, Garrett, here. I think he can play anywhere on the field, which is another attribute to him that makes him a really valuable dynasty receiver because he can line up anywhere. And you mentioned, like, he played this year across the generational talent. And there's a lot of players we talked about this a couple of weeks ago, like the word generational is silly a lot of times.
I'm fine saying it with
Jeremiah Smith is a true generational talent. I think when it's all said and done, he'll probably be the best wide receiver I've ever seen come out of college, like him and Calvin Johnson. Probably the 2 best receivers I've ever seen come out. NFL draft. I think if he was in the draft this year, there's an argument he'd go number 1 overall. Jeremiah Smith as a freshman. But going back to Emeka Egbuka is like, look what he's done every single year at Ohio State. He came back this year because he came out last year and he still would have had a fine grade on him, but came back this year because he wanted to win, end up winning a national championship. Mm-hmm. But look what he did year in and year out, going over 1,000 yards with Jeremiah Smith and Carnell Tate around him, having Marvin Harrison Jr. around him. Having
Jackson Smith and
Jigba, having Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave, all those guys are around him, and he just came in and got it done week in and week out, and was always reliable. And from the moment, and again, going to Ohio State, the one thing I will say about those players is the only thing that's different for me when I watch them is I've had the privilege of watching those guys every snap because I watch every Ohio State game. I'll never grade a player higher because they're in Ohio State, but I do see more of them just because the way it all works out. And Emeka Egbuka, literally since the moment he stepped on campus, was always like a very reliable receiver. And he just got a little better and a little better and a little better every single year, and always trustworthy, never worried about going to him with the football. So I think, again, as my number 2 receiver I would like to have a decent amount of shares. I think he's a great, like, mid to back end first round pick in your rookie draft. If you need a receiver, he's going to slide right in there. And I think what's nice about him is I can see him easily being like a wide receiver 2 year in, year out. Wouldn't surprise me if he turned in like a couple of those like Terry McLaurin year, like all of a sudden he had a wide receiver 1. Yeah, a couple spike years where he's in a right situation, works up to being the number 1 with the right quarterback. He could be a wide receiver 1, but the perfect wide receiver you want to grab at the back end of your first or middle of the first, where he's like a mid-range wide receiver 2 year in, year out for the next 10 years, and you can slide him in your wide receiver 3 slot, and that's a championship caliber player. But worst case, he's your wide receiver 2. Really nice player. Excited. I hope I get some shares of Emeka Egbuka.
Agreed, man. I'm with you there. And I feel real similar, so I'm not going to just beat that dead horse.
Last thing I'll say, my actual score, I don't think I gave it, 76.73. Not an outrageous score for a wide receiver 2 in the class. There are definitely years. I mean, last year, my wide receiver 2s and 3s were 78s and 79s, I think.
Really good class.
It was a really good class. So I don't want to, as good as he is, and I think deserving of being the number 2 or maybe for some people number 3 wide receiver, him and Tet are like really close on my scores. So I'd be fine either one ahead of the other one. I think they're close. Emeka, I think safer. Tet has a little bit higher ceiling. Depends what you want, really, I think, in your drafts.
Yep.
But all of that being said, I do think if you're looking for somebody where you're like, hey, I need to not waste this pick, Egbuka's your guy.
Yep. No
Even some running backs. If you want someone safety, if you want somebody safe, he's the pick. And
Yep.
so he did great out and the nerd score wise. He's your number 2 wide receiver too.
Nerd score number 2 wide receiver wise. The one thing I haven't said about him yet that I kind of had a little bit, the workman like mentality, the not freakish athletic ability, but just does all the things right, does remind me of a guy like an Amon-Ra, where he'll hit you hard, he'll catch tough passes, he'll go over the middle, he's not going to beat you with elite speed.
That's probably a good ceiling comp for him.
I think that's a
Amon-Ra St.
ceiling.
Brown.
You know, I don't know if he'll reach it, but that's a ceiling.
That's a high.
It's a very high ceiling.
It's a very high ceiling.
Yeah, I mean, he definitely has the skills to become a best friend to a quarterback, and that's what it takes to be an Amon-Ra St. Brown is to really gain the trust of a QB quickly, and that way you get targeted a lot.
Yeah,
So.
10 catches, 120 yards. It's there. I'll have a lot of shares. So I bet a lot of people come away with and that's what's weird too, because like you see everybody else's rankings where it's like Tet's 1. And I understand a lot of people have Travis Hunter off their board as a receiver because they don't know yet. But then like everybody has like Luther Burden and Matthew Golden as their like 2, 3. For the most part, I've seen them like, oh man, like my eyes are just completely different because I don't see that.